To this second screencast that will show you how you can implement the boolean.js library. We saw in the previous screencast how you can import dependencies, especially boolean dependencies for Shiny. But the main problem now is that these dependencies and elements in the boolean library are not interactive. This is just CSS, meaning things you can see, but you cannot interact with them. If I go back to the boolean documentation, you see here notifications. And usually notifications are things you use to display messages to the user, let's say feedback, for instance. And the problem with boolean notification, they provide the template, but it's not interactive. You cannot close it, you cannot make it appearing. So if you don't know very well JavaScript, it can be quite challenging to implement this. And this is the reason why we use a third-party library, which is called boolean.js. And the first thing we need to do, as previously, is to go to the boolean.js and inspect the documentation. The documentation may be found here. So you see there is a website. And the first thing I do, I click on documentation, I go to installation, and it gives me instruction how I can install Bulma. It's the same thing for Bulma. So here I can import scripts, I can put them locally, or I can also point to a CDN, Content Delivery Network. Like in the previous video, I used JS Deliver and I type Bulma.js. And it's important here because I have several results. I have Bulma.js, Bulma.js. I even have Bulma, and then I have the fourth one, which is another one, Bulma.js. Which one is a good one? This is a good question. If you look on the documentation, the good one is the fourth one. So this is the reason why you should first search to really have the good target. So you may inspect the folder. Inside you have a lot of different files. You have CRC, you have dist, you have test. So this is typically a JavaScript folder. What we need here, in our case, we just need the dist folder in which we will find all sources we want. According to the Bulma documentation, you may import all plugins at the same time by loading the Bulma.js script, or you may also individually import components like the navigation bar. It could also be alert, and could be a lot of different things. In our case, we will only use notifications and models because we only want notifications or models. This is the first question of the exercise, is about importing dependencies. If you remember, what we did in the last part was to use a create dependency from the RPharma package. And I know the name of the package I need to import. I need to copy the name returned by JS Deliver, which is at visuallog/bulma.js. Same thing as previously, you may only point to the CDN, or you may also make a copy of those files locally on your computer. In that case, I will just point to the CDN. I click on enter, it will take the latest version for me. There are quite some versions here actually, so I take the latest one by default, which is 0.11.0. I could take another one, but I think it's better to take the last one here. And I run the function, I click on enter. The function generates our code for me, Bulma.js dependencies. As I told you, we only need notification in that part because we are going to work with a notification. I will just put that script, and this is it. It's really best practice to only keep what you need. If you don't need to use tabs, if you don't need to navigation bar, you don't need to load them in the script. So now we run devtools load all to keep our function. And we want to test our dependencies in the Bulma page, what we developed previously. So here we don't have time to recreate the Bulma dependencies, to recreate the Bulma page. So I imported everything for you. Here you have the Bulma page, we even have the Bulma button. And you have the dependencies, the Bulma dependencies, and the newly created Bulma.js dependencies. So what I can do at that step is I use the add Bulma.js dependency function on that. This is what I'm doing now. And I run this simple application. How I check that my dependencies are successfully added, I click on inspect, and then I go to the head, and as you can see, I have Bulma, and I even have Bulma.js. So this is it, I have everything I need, especially notification.js. All right, so this is really the first step. Each time you want to import a new library, you need to add dependencies to Shiny. This is mandatory. The second step is to work on the widget itself. So this is about notification. It's useful to send user feedback. And Shiny even has a notification system. If you remember, there is a Shiny notification, the show notification function. I can search for that function, and here you have an example. I can run the example here. So I run my application. I click on show, and it will show a notification here. I can do many things with notification. This is extremely powerful and not really invasive. If you know the models, for instance, models take the whole screen, and it's completely different. So let's go back to the documentation, and we click on notification, and here we have a lot of description how we may create that notification. So here on Bulma, it's only made from JavaScript. There is no, you don't need to create the HTML component, and here everything is configured for JavaScript. So it's done with this API. So you first attach the notification to a target, and here we use CSS selectors. You have you have hash with the ID of the tag you want to target, which means you want to target by ID and only one tag. And then you call the notification function, which is actually here a method because JavaScript is object-oriented. And inside you pass different options, like body will contain the notification text as shown here. Info will be the color, and then you have other parameters like is dismissible, which is a boolean saying whether you want to manually close the notification or not. So if you say true, you will have an icon on the top right side showing that you can close the icon manually, and you can control the dismiss interval time in milliseconds, and so on. So this is the way it works. What do we need to do on our package? So we have to first create the notification handler to send a message, if you remember, from R to JavaScript. And this message will contain the notification configuration, meaning the notification body contents, whether it can be dismissed, the color, and many more parameters. And on the JavaScript side, you need a receptor to that message. So it will be the Shiny at custom message handler. In SharePoint, you don't need to create those files by hand. You have a function that does that automatically for you. It's a create custom handler, and then you pass the name of what you want to create. In our case, it's notification. I put that in my R console. I click on OK, and you see that I have two scripts that are created. I have notification handler in the R folder that is created a function called send notification message, and then I have my JS part, which is just a Shiny Hat custom message handler. So the next step is to connect those two parts. So if you remember, they are connected by the type So on the R side, the type is notification. It makes sense. We are working with notification. On the JS side, I need to replace here, because it's a placeholder, I need to replace that by notification. I need to make sure that my two parts can connect together. And I think it's more meaningful here. I have message. It's more meaningful to put message rather than args. That case, it will help users to better understand your functions. The notification handler has three parameters: the ID for the target. If you remember, you can attach the notification to a target. And you have options, which will be a list containing different configuration. And the session parameter. The session parameter is here because you need to use the session object. If you remember, the session is an object from our point of view, a R6 object. And it has several methods, especially the send custom message that allows you to send messages on the JavaScript side. And they are resaved by the add custom message handler, provided that they are connected by the same type. Extremely important. That's probably 3 times I say the same thing, but this is something you should keep in mind. That's extremely, extremely crucial. All right, so now we'll do some modification to our files. I think it's more meaningful to call our handler show boolean notification rather than send message. And then I will replace the body by this part here. It's slightly different. I will explain you why. So here I copied the message. So why do I use drop nulls? I use drop nulls because imagine if sometimes, I may want to say I don't provide any ID, and by default, I want the notification to be added to the body tag. In that case, ID will be null, and I don't want it to be sent to JavaScript. So the drop nulls function makes sure I don't send anything. It will remove null elements from the list. Same thing for options. If I don't pass dismiss, if I don't pass, let's take like the size, for instance. If I don't pass the size, it will be null, and I don't want to send it to JavaScript. So I still use drop nulls. So what I want to send two things. I want to send ID because it's my target. So I put ID equal ID. And options. Options will be a list we provide on the R side, a list containing the body content, a list containing the status color, and this is it. And on the JavaScript side, I will recover the message will be an object. It won't be a list, it will be an object with two properties. The first property will be ID, so message.id, and the second property will be message.options. So we are okay with the R part, it's right. And now it's time to modify the JavaScript part. As I told you, it's possible. So first of all, I will copy this snippet here. And this is definitely possible that I don't have any ID, I don't have any target for the notification. So if I don't have ID is undefined if I don't pass it from the R part. It will be undefined in JavaScript. And in that case, I will attach to the body by default. So I use the notification API as it's provided by the documentation. And then I will copy the notification function. And the last thing to do is to show the notification. So the configuration is contained in message.options. And same thing for the else part. When I have provided an ID, I want to attach the notification to a specific tag. I recover this ID, and then I pass my options. I say I want to show the notification, and this is it. I'm basically done with that. So we are not completely okay. For now, we need to include the notification in a dependency because right now it's a script in the int folder, and we need to provide a link so that we can import it into our Shiny app. I use the create custom dependency from RPharma. So if you remember, I have the create dependency, which imports already existing libraries from JS Deliver, and in our case, this is something we created locally. So I will point to my script, which assumes it contained in the int folder, and I call it custom. So now it points to the good script, and here you see it reorganized a bit on my folder. So I have custom, the version of my package. The script is in the JS folder. If I had CSS files, they would be in the CSS folder, and so on. Here I have my add custom dep function. So this is, at that point, this is good. So if you remember, to add dependencies with RPharma, we created several functions. We have add Bulma dependencies, which is contained in the Bulma page function. We have Bulma.js dependencies, and we call the add Bulma.js dependency on the Bulma page function. And these are a lot of function call we chain together. Imagine if we had to call add custom dependencies on top of that. It doesn't make sense at that step. And RPharma provides a function which is called add dependencies. And add dependencies, you provide a vector of dependencies. So in our case, I provide Bulma.js, and I also provide custom. And it will add Bulma.js and custom in the same order I put them in the vector. So it's important because sometimes it may happen you need specific order in your dependencies because some script doesn't load when they are launched before or after. And this is it allows to be flexible in that case. Just reminder that the Bulma page contains the Bulma dependencies, so you don't need to include them. And what I do in this application, I add my dependencies and I test the notification. So I call the show Bulma notification. I want to add the notification to a target I created in the Bulma page, and the target will be displayed on the top right of my application. I don't want the notification to be displayed full screen, in the body. It's better, it's less invasive here. And the second parameter I pass to Bulma notification is a list. It's a list of options. So here is the message content, the color, and the dismiss interval, which is the time after which the notification disappears. If I run my application, and then I click on the button, you see the notification that is shown on the top right side. And it disappears after 2 seconds. From that, if you follow the documentation, you may change those options. So they are listed here. So you may change the color status. You may say that your notification, you can close it. In that case, if you can close it by hand, it doesn't make a lot of sense to have a dismiss interval of 2 seconds. There is no documentation regarding, if you want to have a limited dismiss interval. So I put it a very long time, and I rerun the application. If I click, then the notification can be closed. The expire time is quite long, so I can close the notification by hand, and this is it. So we are okay with this notification exercise. So as you can see, it's fairly simple. You don't have a lot of things. It's always the same process we use. We import dependencies, then we create the R message to send messages from R to JavaScript. And after that, we create the JavaScript receptor. And RPharma provides you a lot of functions to create that automatically. You don't need to copy and paste code, which is a repetitive task. So we can continue. Yeah, this is, I would say, a bonus. This was not done during the workshop because we didn't have time. So from now, we only did, we communicated from R to JavaScript, but what we could do is then to do the reverse, to send messages from JavaScript to R. And how I do that, what I will do is when my notification is closed, I will display a message on the R side. So how I do that? I go to the documentation, and you see I can add extra events. There are several events. So I have init, open, close, dismissed, and destroyed. So what does open do? What it does is when notification is open, it triggers an event. When it's closed, it triggers an event. And when it's dismissed, it triggers when it's dismissed. So what I do is I will create, when the notification is closed, I will create an event. So what I do here is I will add a custom message, which is an event listener. I need to slightly change the structure of the notification. So what I do is I don't show the notification at that step. And I will create a variable which is called var notif. Something you can do in JavaScript, you can unassign. You can let it unassigned. This is something you cannot do in R, but here it's quite powerful. And here I say notif equal boolma then dot notification, and I pass my options. And I do the same thing in the else statement. And then at the end of that, I want to show the notification on any case. So I do notif.show, and it will show the notification. Now I want to add an event listener that will only trigger when my notification closes. So the event listener structure is fairly simple. I already have methods provided by the documentation. I know that there is an onClose event, and then I pass my function, what I want to trigger after the close event. And obviously, I need to call this event on the notification. The reason why I use notif.on and so on. And what I do is I will use the shiny set input value. So it's a way you can create input on the fly. And if you remember, shiny is a JavaScript object. This is something I mentioned during the workshop in the slides. I'll put the priority to event because, you know, sometimes the value of the input doesn't change, and it means, and if it doesn't change, it will not be invalidated and it will not trigger reactivity, something I don't want. And here, yeah, this is, I will give it a value like notification closed. So this is the value of my input. So on the other side, I will access it to input $notification underscore closed. And I give it the value true. So here it's important I use true with small letters rather than true in capital letters. Just remind you, we are working in JavaScript. And my event is done here basically. So we want to test that. I will slightly change my script. I create another observe event which is listening to input notification closed. All right, and I can do many things. So what I want to do in that case, I will show a model. So obviously I could use a model from Bulma, but it's not implemented right now. So what I will do is I proceed exactly like this. So I will first create my model. So I copy directly from the Shiny documentation. So let's use a model dialog. title equal model. Then I do some text inside. I use the show model from Shiny. All right, so for obviously I need to reload everything because I modified my script. So now I click. And you see that obviously it doesn't work. And here it's a good step to show you how you can debug events. So what I do is I run my application and I will open the HTML inspector. Because my script is contained in an HTML dependency, I can debug it. I can access it in the source tab. So you see I have my custom dependency and my script is inside. I have the notification, and what I can do is I know that this part works. I can show the notification, but this part here doesn't really work. So what I want to do is to understand why it doesn't work. So I will put a breakpoint at that stage. I reload my application. I use click me, and then I click on dismiss. You see that the event is triggered. So I checked the input value then. And what I need to do is I go back to the R code. I checked whether I made a typo or not. Doesn't seem I made a typo. I have input $notification closed. So I go back to JavaScript. I run the code. And you see that it says model is not a function. So what it means is I probably missed, there is probably something I missed, a dependency which is missing. And this is here something I didn't mention, but because we are using Bulma, we are not using Bootstrap. And here this was a trap. The reason why I wanted to show you this doesn't work. We don't have Bootstrap, and models are part of the Bootstrap template. It means that we cannot use them. And this is, the debugger here is extremely helpful to know what goes wrong. So I cannot use model, so let's display another notification. And I will attach it to target. And I will edit the text. This is the second message. I don't change other options, and I put success. And I rerun the application. I click, I close the application as a notification, and you see the second notification here. So it means I'm successful, it works. And if it didn't work before, as I remind you, Bootstrap is not included in the dependencies. But the reason why the function is not available and it triggers an error. As I told during the workshop, the developer tools are extremely useful. This will help you to debug errors, and most of the time you'll be able to figure out by yourself why it doesn't work. Perfect. So this was everything I wanted to show about the notification. So there was a bit more content than in the exercise. I just wanted to show you that you can also communicate and send messages from JavaScript to R. And this is extremely powerful. Because of that, you may imagine implementing a lot of other functions. So in Bulma, for instance, you have other components. You have progress bars. So progress bar, you may imagine you want to update them our site programmatically to make it a dynamic component instead of static. So we may do a lot of different things. Now let's switch to the second part, which was about building a model. So something we haven't done during the demonstration, during the presentation, because we didn't have time. So the idea is the same. So we inspect the model documentation from the boolean.js JavaScript library. And it explains you everything, how you need to create a model. And here we have two ways. Either we do everything from JavaScript, or we do a bit from HTML and then a bit from JavaScript. Because we already did pure JavaScript for notification, I will do HTML and a bit of JavaScript for model, just to show you two ways to do that. So this is how a model looks like. You may all be familiar with a model. So the first thing we need to do here is importing the model template. The model template is provided in the documentation. If you look at the Boolma page, the Boolma documentation, it's a bit different. If you take the model, if you copy this template and we use it with the Boolma.js, it will not work. I tried. There are different classes, and it only works with a specific template, the model card. This is important. That's the reason why it's shown in the documentation like this. So I copied the HTML, and the goal is to convert this HTML code into R using the HTML to R function. So if you remember, we use HTML to R and we copy our code. We use single quotes because the double quotation will fail with HTML. I can use prefix equal true because sometimes, if you remember, some tags are not available if you call the function like you would call div and so on. So you need tags $section, for instance. And then I convert and I get the corresponding R code immediately. So what I need to do is I create a Boolma model script. Inside, I create the Boolma model function. What I can do, actually, I already provided the template here, so I will replace by templates. There are already predefined parameters. So the model ID is mandatory. Here there is no discussion. The title is not mandatory. Here it will be the model content, and the footer will contain several buttons, like to close the model, to do other actions. And here this is our code, and I replace this by what I get from the HTML to R conversion. Obviously, you see that the footer must be replaced. So I still need to get the footer wrapper, but I can remove the buttons, the two buttons, and I will simply put footer, and it will be retrieved from the footer parameter. The ID is here hard-coded. I need to put ID. The background is mandatory, and then the title, this is included in the head. So what I can do is I just replace this by the title parameter, and then this is the model content, which I can replace by ... So that I can really include anything I want in the model. That's the reason why I use ... We are okay with the function. And now we still have to create the handler, so meaning the communication between R and JavaScript. I need a R script to send a message to JavaScript, and then I need a receptor to receive that message on the JavaScript side. I use the create custom handler from Sharpant, and this time I will call it model. It creates me two pieces. If you remember, I have the model handler and I have the JavaScript side. Good practice is first to change the type and put the same on the JavaScript side so that you are sure that they communicate. If you miss that part, it will not work. And this is, I would say, 90% of errors come from this. You don't make the communication happening because you have a wrong type. I rename my R function by something a bit more meaningful, because send model message is something general, but you could keep it if you want. And I call it toggle model. And then we have everything we want. So we don't need to pass options because we choose to create the model on the HTML side. We could also create the model on the JavaScript. This is important to specify. And then what I need to do is to look at the documentation and start editing the JavaScript file. So if you look at the documentation, a model is visible. When a model is visible, it has a class isVisible. This is important because it will drive the JavaScript file configuration. So here I copy this piece of code. All right, so the first thing I want to send on the other side is the ID. So I put ID equal ID, and this is everything I will send. I will not send anything else. On the JavaScript side, I can recover the model ID by putting message.id. So this will be the ID property of the message I sent from the outside, because I remind you, this is the list I send. And then, so I have the model ID that I constructed. I can put it in the boolma function. So it's the same process as notification, boolma brackets, I put the target, and then instead of .notification, I have .model. It creates an instance of the model. And then I have to say if I want to close or if I want to open the model. So I need to detect if the model has isActive class. If it's open, it will have the isActive class. I use the hasClass method from jQuery, and I will point to my model. So I will use $brackets model.hasClass is active. If the class is active, then I will close the model. And if it's open, I will, if it's not open, if it doesn't have the class is active, I will open the model. All right, so we check that the type is the same. So this is right, we send the message, we recover the ID, the function is properly configured. The next thing I need to do is to create a custom dependency, because if you remember, the model script is in the ins folder. It's not linked to the template right now. So what I do at that point, I can rename. What I can do is I can rename my dependency here. I can create a model one, or I could also move the model script to the custom folder here. And this is what I will do. So I will move into the custom JS, right? And I will edit the custom R script to include the model. I think it's better to do that way. At the end of the day, you don't want to have like a model dependency, notification dependency. You know that it's custom scripts, so they may be gathered at the same place. All right, and then I do devtools load all. I use the add dependency function. I will load the boolma.js first to be able to access the notification and the model API. And then I use a custom to load my model. I have the boolma model function, so this is right. I have the toggle boolma model function, so this is perfect, and I have a boolma button to toggle the model. So let's test it. So if I click on enter, it doesn't work. So it's good because again I want to show you why it doesn't work. So we'll have a look at the HTML inspector. So I click on inspect, I go to source. Here I have two scripts. I have the model and everything I want. I will put a breakpoint in the custom message handler. I rerun my application. I run click me. I go inside, I inspect. So message.id, so what it contained my model. So I run this part. It creates the model. All right. So now what I want to do is to I want to go to, so here I have an error message. It says that boolma is not a function. So yeah, let's have a look. Maybe I have some problem with. So according to the documentation, you see that basically I'm doing quite good on the JavaScript side. Still need to open the script again. All right, so the script is here. So you see that I could call it my model. I think this is not really wise to call a variable the same name as a method. All right. So the boolma model function is here. Let's inspect if I have a correct ID. So everything seems fine. I do devtools load R. I run my application. I click, but still I cannot see the model, and it's keeping. It says me that it still doesn't work. So if I look then at the dependencies, you see that I only have notification in the boolma dependency, and this is something I completely missed. The boolma.js dependency, I only have notification, so it could never work in that case. I need to call the model script, and if I rerun that, I have the model. And again, thanks to the HTML inspector, I was able to debug that part. So just to show you how it's extremely useful, there are many things, many errors you can do, many typos you can have the wrong type here, you can forget a dependency. It's extremely easy to do that. And yeah, it's really a game changer, these developer tools. So this is the end of this exercise. Hopefully, you're convinced that yeah, the HTML inspector is extremely useful. And I just say you that I'm going to record a third video about custom input bindings. This is a very exciting part. So I say thank you for your attention and see you later.